All right. Aloha, everybody.
Hey, is this thing on? I gotta tell. Okay, what? Hey, what? This thing on or what?
Yes,
I always
yes,
do that
it is
because,
on.
I don't want to be accused of us having one more boring Zoom live presentation. So, if anything, we're gonna try and, keep you entertained, well educated. And with that in mind, we have one of our favorite people that we love to work with. Adrian, who are we talking with today?
We are talking to the president, Will Tanaka of First Hawaii Title.
Everyone,
And he's also our friend and, just a great resource for our team, for our clients. So we're super excited to be interviewing Will on our Friday Live.
Yeah, welcome, Will.
thank you so much, Adrian Attilio.
What's the latest, Will? What do you want to tell us about you, about your company, life in general?
Well, this has certainly been an adventure.
Yeah.
A very interesting, unprecedented time. I think I feel very fortunate to be in this essential business to not only keep our real estate industry surviving, but for our whole economy alive to strive. So, for example, if yes, we're buying and refinancing, and people are selling, and at the same time, if you really think about it from a global standpoint, the conveyance tax, it helps the state government.
Yeah.
The real property taxes that are being paid, it helps the city and county. So, whatever we could do to keep our real estate industry thriving is going to impact our greater economy. So I'm very grateful that we're in this economy or in this industry as essential business, and the interest rates are still low. It's a seller's market. There was, I would say, a late summer start where things are peaking. People are trying to sell, low inventory. The interest rates, it dipped below 3%. I think it's still hovering around 3% as of this past week. So because of that, it's seller's market. At the same time, the buyers, who are able to have the opportunity to get at a historically low interest rate. So that's what I mean. It's very interesting. It's a fascinating time, and it really comes down. Yeah.
So Will, how has First Hawaii Title shifted or pivoted with this whole new way of doing business? Could you share with our listeners or viewers about that?
Well, great question. And as we're doing now internally, Zoom calls have been vital for us to keep connected when we're on staggered schedule, to keep connected with people on Maui, with our corporate office on the mainland, where we have the quarantine period. So being technology savvy, where everyone has the capability to work remotely, and also when necessary to work from the office.
Yeah. And then what about with your clients?
Yeah.
With the buyers and the sellers and the refinance, how is that changed?
Great question. So when it comes to our clients, and I think there's a wide spectrum of people who are, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, people who weren't very conscious about the coronavirus. I think recently the gap has become closer, but there's still a wide gap of people who are very careful about the COVID-19 versus people who are not as careful. So First Hawaii Title, right now we give 3 options for client signings. So one is the traditional mobile signing, where at the convenient place and time for the client, we'll send a mobile notary to either their home or a public place, if allowed, to have a mobile notary signing there. The second option we have is what we call a drive-by or curbside signing. And it happens in one of 2 ways, where if the client, the buyer, the seller, or the person who's refinancing is, risk averse or very cautious about, meeting the signer, getting too close, we could drive by to their house, and the notary would stay in the car, drop off documents at the front of the house. They would pick it up, And then they could either socially distance or they could do like a webcam signing.
Oh, so then the webcam signing, that's the third way.
Right. So yeah, the second
How
way
does
is
that work?
drive-by or curbside, and the webcam or remote online notarization. So when this all hit back in March, Governor Ige passed a emergency order to allow what's almost similar to a remote online notarization. So what would happen is, just like as we're doing this right now. So Adrian, let's say you're the buyer, I'm the notary, and all the documents would be delivered to Adrian prior to the signing. And if
Mhm.
I'm a notary, you would, flash your ID, your driver's license, and any other ID, sign, make sure that I see you sign so I could verify that it's your signing. So we would do everything, the signing virtually.
And is this still the general practice, or at what point does this virtual signing, not be like a way to do it? Because I know like there's going to be like a cutoff, right, where they're not going to allow that.
Okay, so the remote online notarization, that's a bill that the industry, the escrow and title industry, have been trying to pass since last year.
Mm-hmm.
So
wow.
it didn't go very far last year, and this year it was already in queue before they cut off the legislative session. So what happened was, after Governor Ige signed the audio-visual signing into law, during this pandemic period, then the industry, as a group, we pushed for the remote online notarization. So that's going to pass, I believe, by the House and the Senate, and it's sitting in front of the governor for his signature, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So this will be something that will extend past, the lockdowns and the social distancing. So it'll be probably like a new way of doing business in the future.
Yeah. This is going to be the future. I think it's like anywhere else. It's going to take some time for everyone to get used to it. The one caveat, and this is a very important caveat, is something like this has to be approved by the lender.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's a big one. So even if the buyer and the seller agree that we could move forward with virtual signing, the buyer's lender must approve the remote online notarization. So on the lending side, it's still at its infancy stage. So there's a lot of lenders that are not approving their loan docs to be signed virtually under remote online notarization. However, the governor's emergency order is slightly different from a remote online notarization. And what I mean by that is, so webcam, visual, audio signing, right? So I'm looking at you, Adrian. I confirm that this is your signature, confirm that, you're the person who's signing the deed and the mortgage and all the loan docs. So after that, if I would need to somehow get possession of the wet original signatures.
So that would be done via maybe a FedEx or mail,
or courier or
courier.
Right.
Okay.
Some type of delivery. So the emergency order that's allowed by Governor Ige, the signer has to be in the state of Hawaii. Must be in the state of Hawaii. Right.
So it won't apply for if you're out of state. It's only Hawaii.
Right. So the notary and the signer has to be in the state of Hawaii. That's correct.
Well, interesting times, and I'm glad that the title and escrow industry has been able to really shift very quickly to keep everyone safe and keep the real estate transactions moving.
Absolutely. I think, Adrian, I think you guys were at the forefront of the virtual open houses and the brokers open and the virtual tours. So I think you guys pivoted very quickly.
Well, it's good to have all parts of the real estate transaction, all of us working together, to keep everyone safe during this unusual time that we're in.
right? And if I may add, another interesting thing is the Bureau of Conveyances. That's our state recorder's office. So that's they have the final say when the deed and the mortgage records and say, Adrian, you're the legal title holder of this new property. So the Bureau of Conveyances, we work very closely with them, and they've been very accommodating during this pandemic. So what's been challenging, especially in the beginning, was if you have clients on the mainland and in foreign countries. So for example, Canada. There's a lot of Canadian investors in Hawaii. And in Canada, because they're not part of the apostille, what they would have to do is, if you're a Canadian resident, you would have to go to the U.S. consulate's office in Canada. But what happened when the U.S. consulate office is closed in Canada? What do you do? So we worked hand in hand with the Bureau of Conveyances, and they made some exceptions to the rule, especially during this pandemic. Where, the barrister, what they call it, would just have to provide a letter of good standing, but you wouldn't need the U.S. embassy or the consulate to give that stamp of approval in that case. So, if you have clients on the mainland, they're doing remote online notarizations or in foreign countries. We've seen it all the last 4 months.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of people that are from out of state or out of the country that they're selling, right? Because they can't come and stay here, or they can, but then there's the 14-day quarantine, and it's very difficult to do the vacation rentals. Maybe you could talk a little bit about HARPTA, because this comes up all the time. I feel like we're talking about this all the time, and it's one of those things that just, it can be kind of confusing.
Okay.
So, what is HARPTA, and why should we be aware of it?
That's a great question. I would say it's always in the top 5 of all hot topics in real estate. Every single year, we have this topic, and we all learn something new. So HARPTA is the Real Estate Property Tax Act. And basically, the State of Hawaii Tax Department, they require all transactions to withhold 7.25% of the sales price if the seller is not a resident of Hawaii.
What if the seller doesn't have enough equity? What if, do they have to come to the table with that 7.25%?
Okay, great question. So I'm going to just give you an example, Adrian. Okay. So let's say the sales price is $1 million. And it's a California resident. It's investment property. So if they were subject to HARPTA at closing, so remember, this is a sales price of $1 million. They would have to withhold $72,500. That amount has to be submitted to the state of Hawaii. So that's a lot of money, right?
That is.
So what happens? So let's say that they're underwater and there's not enough money. They could apply for a HARPTA exemption from the state of Hawaii. So that has to be done at least 10 business days prior to closing date.
What happens if the state of Hawaii says, no, you're not exempt? Or do they often do that? Or do they usually just approve it if you're underwater?
Well, so I would say in most cases, almost all cases, they would approve it if you could show proof on what's called the N288B form, and with supporting documents that you are actually, in the red, or you're actually losing money, or you don't have enough to cover the 7.25%. Then they will approve either, waive that 7.25%, or they'll actually reduce that amount, whatever you're able to pay. And remember, the HARPTA is not a tax; it's a withholding. So what that means is you could apply for a refund through the client's, tax professionals after closing.
So they just need to make sure that there is enough money to pay any kind of outstanding taxes, and then the rest of it will be released to the seller.
That's exactly right.
All right.
And the reason why escrow gets involved is under the state of Hawaii law, it's almost unfair, but the onus, the burden is actually put on the buyer under the law to make sure that if the seller is in fact has to withhold the 7.25%, the state of Hawaii, they put it on the buyer to make sure that happens. So, so this is escrow is so vital.
Yeah. So basically, if something gets missed and they don't pay whatever is owed, the buyers are going to be responsible for that seller's tax obligation?
Well, under the law, and this is where escrow comes in. So first of all, all of our escrow officers and teams were trained and well-versed in HARPTA because this issue has come up, so many times, to make sure that at the beginning of the transaction, there's a form called N289. It's basically it's saying that if the seller marks check box number 1 saying I'm a resident, then we're good. And then if they don't check off box number 1, or they confirm that they're a non-resident, then we would have to deal with a 7.25%.
How does it work if you are a military member and you're stationed here? But as you know, with active duty military, you can have your home of record or have be a resident of whatever state that you came from. How does that work? That's always kind of a tricky situation.
Military is always tricky. And that's always a hot topic as well. So under the state of Hawaii law, for military, you cannot gain or lose residency due to military orders. So for example, let's say that the military family, they're stationed here, they gain Hawaii residency, and they were, due to military orders, they had to move to Virginia, for example. And then now they move to Virginia and they're trying to sell their home. You cannot, under state law, that family cannot lose their Hawaii residency for purposes of HARPTA due to military orders. And then likewise, if they were a Virginia resident and they were stationed in Hawaii due to military orders, they don't automatically become Hawaii residents due to military orders. They're still a Virginia resident. So just because you're military doesn't always exempt you from HARPTA. HARPTA really just looks at, are you a resident in the state of Hawaii? So that's the first question. And the ancillary questions are, in which state are you paying the taxes to? Virginia or Hawaii? Is this a secondary home? So it's multi-layered when it comes to military.
So it's probably best for you to have a deeper conversation with your escrow officer on your particular situation when it comes to maybe a military member who has their residency in another state.
Right. So another example is, let's say that you're a resident as of today, right, Adrian? And so when we open escrow, you check off box number 1 and you're a resident. The closing somehow takes place, a couple months later, but by the time we close, you had already moved to another state. So the state of Hawaii actually looks at, were you a resident? Were you living here at the time of closing?
Oh.
So then that gets a little bit tricky, right? So at the time of the closing, you were not a resident, but you had already checked off box N289.
When you opened escrow.
But you already opened, right?
Yeah.
So how do we know that you guys were gonna move? Then we could apply for another exemption from the state, because if you had lived here 2 of the last 5 years, as a resident, that would be another reason why you would be exempt from paying HARPTA. So yeah, there's a lot of types of exemptions. There's a lot of ways that you could be exempted from HARPTA. But the easiest way is if you reside here.
All right. Tilio, do you have any questions on HARPTA, or do you want to move on to another topic? We've got about 10 more minutes.
Yeah, next topic.
Okay, do we want to even get into FERPTA? It's like a HARPTA, but for...
Oh, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we should.
Okay, I'm gonna just quickly touch upon that, because especially if you're on the listing side and you have a foreign seller, and at closing, so for FERPTA, it's they withhold 15% of the sales price, and they submit to IRS. So can you imagine if you're a foreigner and you don't reside in Hawaii? That's 15% for FERPTA, 7.25% for HARPTA. That's 22.5%.
Wow.
So if you think about it, for $1 million property, $225,000 could go to the state. And remember, this is a withholding. So you could always apply for a refund, but that's still a lot of money because that's not even the net proceeds. I'm talking about the gross sales price, the $1 million sales price.
But you've got to wait until it's time for your taxes, right, to get the refunds.
For the
correct?
For the FERPTA, for the IRS, yes, you would have to wait till 2021. For HARPTA, you could do what's called a early return, the N288C, and you could apply for early refund probably about 6 to 8 weeks after closing.
Well, that's good to know.
So I just wanted to touch upon FERPTA because of the amount, 15%.
That's pretty hefty.
And you know, before the 1980s, you would have all these foreign investors, buying property, selling property, and if you were a U.S. resident or U.S. citizen, you would have to pay capital gains taxes. The foreign investor, they didn't have to, so they would just net everything and not ever pay any taxes. So the IRS got smart. They instituted the FERPTA law in 1980, and just similar to the HARPTA law, they put the onus on the buyer. And the IRS will go after the buyer if the seller was supposed to pay the 15% and they didn't. So, and this is why like escrow is vital to any transaction.
Will, what is BRPA?
Oh.
You know what is BRPA?
He does it like burpees.
No, you know what is BRPA? When you get the news that you're gonna have to do HARPTA or FERPTA or both, and you're just like, oh, what? How much?
Yeah,
that's what we call BRPA.
Oh, perfect.
And you make that face.
Yep.
Actually, I'm gonna have to take that. I'm gonna start.
I like heartburn.
I'm gonna take that from BRPA.
Both are like heartburn, so we're gonna call that third category BRPA. What's the next topic? So I mean, it's I think where the big mistakes come in that type of situation is where the agents aren't managing the expectations of the clients.
And then they're already in escrow, and then the clients get surprised, and then they do the BRPA thing.
Yeah. So the seller, what our advice is to the realtors out there, home sellers out there, is do your research, and that's probably part of the pre-qualification process of, what pieces of information do I need to gather in making a good decision on whether I even should sell my home right now.
Right.
Or even if I should be buying in the state of Hawaii because of these HARPTAs and FERPTAs.
Well, FERPTA is
FERPTA is everywhere, but the HARPTA is not.
It's for Hawaii.
Just for Hawaii.
Yeah, I think they have something similar in California, a lower percentage, and maybe some other states, but not all states have something like what Hawaii does.
So make sure that you're informed and you understand how the taxes work where you're going to be purchasing or selling.
Yeah, and especially Adrian and Tilla, I know you guys do a lot of listings, and this is where, especially for the home sellers out there, it's so vital to get very experienced agents like Attila and Adrian. Because what happens is Adrian and Attila will order what's called a title report from First Hawaii Title. And the title report is a very lengthy report that shows a chain, the legal vesting to the title, and any liens, encumbrances, any clause on title against your property. So for the most part, it's invisible because it's on a piece of paper and it's at the Bureau of Conveyances. But when you're in a transaction and you're transferring title to the new owner, you have to know upfront that, yes, you are the legal title holder. I would say it happens very often when a property is passed down from generation to generation, and sometimes they put it in a trust, and they didn't know that it was still in the old trustee. The successor trustee, maybe one of their kids never took over. So they would have to do some legal documents. They thought it was in a trust, but it was an individual, and they had to hire an attorney to go through probate proceedings. So as a home seller, getting a very experienced agent like Adrian Antillo is so vital to make sure that the setup for your sale is, they already laid the foundation and everything's prepped to go when escrow opens.
It's not good to have surprises like that.
No.
There's title issues.
Yeah.
We find a lot of agents will like, oh, we'll just pull the title report when we open escrow.
No.
Here's what we learned about the real estate process. It's so much easier to fix before you go active or before you go into escrow, right? Everybody's calm, everybody's relaxed. We get into escrow, you're a little bit excited. We still have time, anywhere from 30, 40 to 60 days to fix. But then when escrow closes, or we're getting close to escrow, that's when Will, he ends up going bald because he loses all his hair from all the stress of having to fix things last minute. And then right now you're seeing Will right now, like everybody's organized. So that's why his hair is very full and rich right now, because we're doing the preliminary title reports. Yeah. Anything else we need to pay attention to on these title reports?
I think the main things are the vesting, which is the legal title to the property.
Yeah.
And any monetary liens against the property will be at first glance, because they would have to be cleared before we could give legal, valid, good title to the new buyers.
Yeah. And one of the things we talk about, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, when somebody puts a lien on your property, in addition to that, they don't send you like an edible arrangement with a card saying, hey, I want to let you know I put a lien on your property. You don't know, right?
You don't know. You don't know. And I would say it doesn't happen very often, but I have seen some disputes between neighbors where a neighbor will file and record a document just to put a cloud on title.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Doesn't very happen. So now what happens is, let's say it's an invalid lien or invalid document, right?
Yeah.
But then in order to clear it, what would happen is that person would have to go to court, and the court said, hey, you know what? We need to make sure this is off the record, clean it off the record, remove it. So
it just causes trouble for the neighbor, just extra steps.
What we do is we especially with people that are owed money, we just negotiate in the advance lien releases. Mm-hmm. So, because correct me if I'm wrong, the lien release, all of that's all taken care of all one time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think some surprises, especially when it comes to family members, it's like, oh, I didn't know I had a tax lien. I didn't know I had this judgment for a credit card company that, I didn't pay, 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, but it's still on there.
Or they're like, oh, I didn't know I owed all this money on my maintenance fees. But if you're telling me you don't know you owe all this money on your maintenance fees, that would be like walking down the street with an ice pick sticking out of the side of your head. Oh, I didn't know that ice pick was there. No, you do know because you're not paying it.
Yeah.
So here's my advice to the realtors: pull the title reports now, and ask all those questions. I think it's what's important to share with our sellers. Number one, be honest about your situation and forthcoming. And the quote is from Ronald Reagan for our realtors: trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Yeah.
That's from Ronald Reagan. And
the maintenance fee story, that has happened to us on more than one occasion.
Yeah.
Where our sellers did not tell us.
Oh.
It was like
one
years
a
behind.
while ago, and then one recently where they're like, oh, that's like somebody's wants you to pet sit their dog or something, and oh yeah, what's his name? Oh, his name is Killer. And what kind of dog is this? Oh, it's a Rottweiler. But don't worry about that. He's a nice dog. And then Then when they come bring the dog, you're like, oh, by the way, I'm in this middle of this lawsuit because he chewed the leg off of the neighbor. But don't worry about that. So it's information that the more information, the point is, the more people are forthcoming, the more important it is. But because at the end of the day, you guys are the final checkpoint. Was everybody honest and forthcoming? Because talk about title insurance. Why is last thing we'll wrap up, title insurance. Why is that important?
Okay, so I'm gonna just explain it in maybe more layman terms.
Yeah.
For example, everyone has car insurance. You pay annual premiums for an event that happens in the future, right? So if you get into accident sometime in the future, you have your car insurance policy to protect you. Title insurance is the most unique type of insurance because title insurance protects you from a financial loss for an event that happened in the past. So I'm going to say that one more time. Title insurance protects you from financial loss for an event that happened in the past. So, usually when I say this to a buyer, they're like, wait, I don't get it. Why is it in the past? So in Hawaii, we are really rich with history, right? From the 1800s. And, we have to make sure that all the way from the Great Mahele to all the way to the current stage, everything's, all the chain of title is linked up. So we need to make sure that the chain of title, when we provide insurance, is 100% accurate. And, throughout history, sometimes there are broken chains of title. Sometimes there's fraud. There's people who claim title to property from 20, 30 years ago because they were supposed to get a part of an inheritance. So there's all these things that happened in the past that could arise in the future, and that's what insurance is for. Yeah. And just remember, unlike a car insurance or homeowners insurance, it's a one-time payment at closing.
Yeah.
In Hawaii, it's very special because the buyer only pays 40%. The seller pays 60% per the standard purchase contract.
Mm-hmm. So that's good to know the division of, so we're coming to the end here, and I do have one other statement or piece of information I want to share with our people.
We're gonna wrap this up.
What are your thoughts on this topic right here?
I will.
Tanaka.
So I think I don't know if I added in Tanaka because I remember we were at an event and you had given that speech to get people motivated, and I think that's important. When we're in these challenging times, it's important to, everything flows from leadership, and Will is the leadership of First Hawaii Title, and always has a great attitude. I don't know, we've been, Adrian, not a lot of times, but a couple of times, evenings, weekends, having to kind of fix something up, and Will's been available. In all the time we've been working with title companies, and we've been doing this 15, 16 years, over 1,000 transactions, I've never had a president of a title and escrow company get involved on the evenings and weekends to try and fix something because, stuff happens, right? And it's not at the most convenient times, Monday through Friday. So thank you for that, Will.
It's a team effort. So really appreciate all your support, and it's always been the greatest adventure. I always say.
I think you should put this on all your business cards. So that's it.
I'll get that from you. Yeah.
Yep. And
right.
Well, thank you so much for doing that, Adrian.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Will. Thank you for being on here with us, and we'll see you on the next escrow.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to do jazz hands as we wrap it up, but somebody's got to hit the end button while we're doing
okay, that'll be me.